That is the third practice I avoid, the practice that's used in ready-to-wear, which I will not use at home. I had a couple of questions from something I posted in the newsletter a couple of weeks ago. So I thought I'd make a video and try to answer some of these questions. I referred people to my blog post, 3 practices used in ready-to-wear sweaters you might not want to use at home. If you want to go and see it, you can get there quickly by going to ojolly.net/RTW. It will bring you right to the post on crafting fashion. And I talk a little bit about the history of machine knitting. And when I talk about the 3 practices used in ready-to-wear sweaters, I'm talking particularly about cut and sew ready-to-wear sweaters. Now, everyone knows full fashion sweaters are great. These are the sweaters that are made by knitting and shaping each piece of the sweater. For instance, a sleeve would start at the bottom with the cuff and then increase going out, and it would end with the sleeve cap in this shape. And that's the way it would be knitted on the machine or by hand. What I'm doing though is comparing cut and sew sweaters at home to cut and sew ready-to-wear sweaters. So have you ever noticed how on a ready-to-wear sweater at the neckband there is always a seam on the left side? The seam goes from the shoulder seam all the way through the neckband. Here's an example of one. This is a ready-to-wear sweater and it's pretty. I love this Fair Isle. This is the left shoulder seam, and I'm not sure you can see it, but there's a seam that goes all the way through the neckband. Now, the reason for this is the way the sweater is constructed. First, the right shoulder seam is sewn, and then, while the left shoulder seam is still open, the neckband is attached. You can see how it's attached here. It's a little 1x1 rib, and then right below it you can see the stitches. After the neckband is attached, then a seam is sewn from the top of the neckband down. The problem is that it makes this left shoulder intersection right here at the neckband kind of bulky. Here's my cut and sew sweater. Here's the front, and you can see the back. I put the seam for the neckband right in the center back. What this does is eliminate some of the bulk. There aren't as many sections coming together here, so this is nice and flat. If you simply did not want the seam to show, what you can do is put the seam, see, you can barely see it, put the seam right next to the raised knit section in the purl section. I like to call it the valleys. The knits are the hills, the purls are the valleys. Put the seam right there, and it barely shows when the sweater is worn. And you eliminate the bulk right where the band is connected to the rest of the sweater. The next practice used in ready-to-wear, which I don't like doing at home, is sewing the sleeves in flat. The sequence they would use in ready-to-wear would be sew in the right shoulder seam, add the neckband, sew in the left shoulder seam and neckband, sew them together, and then add the sleeves flat. Instead of doing that, what I like to do is, after the shoulder seam is sewn, after both shoulder seams are sewn, and the neckband is added, then I like to actually go and sew the side seams. And then I set in the sleeves as if I were working with woven fabrics. And there is a reason. Before I set in the sleeves, I actually check the fit to make sure I'm happy with the way the body, the way the front and back fit. If I'm happy, then I go ahead and set in the sleeves. If I'm not happy, well, I just remove those seams, do what I need to do for a better fit. Sew the side seams, test it again, sew in the sleeves as I would sew in for a woven garment. The third practice I avoid in my cut and sew sweaters is that of the 3/8 inch seam allowance. Oh, there are so many patterns with 3/8 inch seam allowances, and I understand why. If it's not a sweater knit, often the knit does not fray. But if you're using a sweater knit with bigger stitches, unfortunately, the cut stitches may have a tendency to fray. What you need to do is sew a little bit further away from the edge. So you simply go from 3/8 of an inch to maybe a 1/2 an inch or more. Metric people, you'll be going from 1 centimeter to, I'd make it 1.5 centimeters. Okay, it's not an easy translation there, but just make it bigger than 3/8 of an inch. You'll find that if you sew further away from the edge, the seam will have less of a tendency to ripple. In case the cut edge does fray, you won't get into trouble with just threads hanging out on the edge. You'll have more of a solid surface to sew. So that is the third practice I avoid, the practice that's used in ready-to-wear, which I will not use at home. I know that getting your garments to look like ready-to-wear is a goal for some sewists, but I say work beyond that. Get your sweaters to look better than ready-to-wear. And by following these practices, you can do it. So again, if you want to look at the blog post associated with this video, just go to ojolly.net/RTW. And RTW stands for ready to wear. So see you next time. Thanks for watching and keep stitching. Bye.